Good morning. Hope y'all are doing well this week. I'll be honest, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode this week. I'm just going to share some thoughts that have been on my mind in the last week. But first, before doing that, I did have two comments on my episode from last week. The first is that someone mentioned to me that Texas is big. So if y'all listened to last week's episode, I talk a lot about seasonal depression and how I did not grow up with seasons. And then now that I'm living in Finland, it's like this whole shift on living with the seasons and how to deal with seasonal depression and all of that. And in Texas, it was brought up to me that there are some areas of Texas. I mean, Texas is so big. So there are some areas of Texas where there are seasons. I will say though, like, although there might be a fall and a spring and, proper differentiators between the seasons, there is not the darkness. So I still think that is like a really big difference. But yes, did just want to say that correction just for anyone who is listening who doesn't really know much about Texas. Texas is huge. You have like all of the different terrain in the areas of the state. It's the second biggest state. So yeah, just wanted to mention that. And then another thing that I was kind of thinking is that I started thinking about this on Friday. On Friday I had a really, really shitty day. I was feeling mentally unwell. And I had done all of the things that I felt like I should do to feel okay. And I still felt like absolute shit. I was like crying for no reason. I felt off. I didn't feel like me. It was this major wave of, the classic signs that I get that I am feeling the seasonal depression. And I was just kind of thinking, like, last week during that episode, I was talking a lot about like what I do to deal with the seasons and all of that. But I will say, like, I don't think that it's necessarily something you can think your way out of. I think that sometimes, or like do your way out of. I think sometimes seasonal depression and depression, don't quote me on this, I'm not a scientist, but I think that it's like actually something your brain chemistry altered in some way. And I think that the things that I've talked about doing help your brain function differently. So you can affect the way that it works in some way, but some part of it I think is just biological. Yeah, once again, don't quote me on any of this. I'm not a scientist. I don't really know. But this is at least what I'm thinking. And then, I think it's just easy to then, on Friday when I'm feeling like shit, be like, well, I failed. I haven't done enough to do my way out of this feeling right now. When in reality, I had done a lot of things that I know are good for me and I know can help me get through seasonal depression. But at the end of the day, it was just a shitty day. And I think that that's also just part of moving through the seasons, is understanding that some days it's just going to suck even though you did everything right. So I did just want to mention that for some clarity on, I don't think that you can just think your way out of seasonal depression or depression. I don't think you can just do your way out of it, but I do think there certainly are things that I can do, like I mentioned in last week's episode, that help me. But at the end of the day, sometimes you do all of the right things and you still feel off. You still don't feel good. You don't feel yourself. So yeah, that's all I wanted to mention on last week's episode. And then just for some quick thoughts for today's, I kind of realized as well, this was the end of October, that I have been doing more planning than doing. And I'm a big planner. I mean, I've talked about this a million times on this podcast, but specifically, I was thinking about, in November, I have just started this Instagram series and TikTok series where I'm doing something new every day for the month of November. And it just kind of felt like all of October I was planning for what I was going to do in the future. I kept going back to what are the pillars of my content? What are the things I want to talk about? And I still put out content, but I feel like so much of my energy went towards planning rather than doing. And it just got to the end of the month and I was like, what have I, what was I doing? I made plans to make plans. Half of the days, my plans were I'm going to make a plan for whatever time. And to now be in action mode is a very different pace and mindset. And it feels very different to now be okay, but now I can do because I did all that planning. And I think it does help for me for sure to have a series because it just gives me consistency and I know what I'm going to do for the next 30 days and all of that. Not to say that none of that planning was productive or worth it, but I do find that I fall into this trap of planning rather than doing. And I think it's because planning feels safe and doing feels uncertain. Doing is doing it. And I feel before I do, I want to overthink everything to make sure that when I do, like, it goes smoothly. And when I started thinking about this, like, why did I spend so much time and energy on planning when, like, and then I can just see so many areas of my life where I feel like there's a pressure to be sure of everything before you do it. And that is everything. Like that, I not just with me planning my content, but, moving abroad, career stuff, like all of this creative stuff. Like I feel like I just need to plan before I do. And I think that stems from this overall feeling in your 20s of like, you need to have stuff figured out. Before you start something, you need to have it figured out. And I think at the end of the day, like, no one has everything figured out. Like you figure out stuff as you do it. And it's easy to recognize this pattern in myself, but then it's a very different thing to just be like, okay, let's just do rather than plan. But I think it's, it's something that I want to try to start doing a little bit more, is not planning as much and I will always be planning, but maybe letting go of the root of it. And that root of it is like that control and fear of mistakes and fear of like it not going well and wanting to feel ready. Just the pressure to have everything pre-planned before you dive into something. I think that it'll probably like always exist in life, but I think just maybe growing up and getting older is just realizing like you just have to do stuff even if you don't know what's going to happen, because that's everything in life, I guess. Like you just have to jump into stuff even if you don't know where it's going to go, and just trust that like you're going to figure it out as time moves on. And if it does turn out to be a disaster, whatever it is that you're doing and wherever it is that you're headed, you will change and you will do something differently to like shift it away from being a disaster and to like learn from it. So yeah, that was just kind of my thought. It's just looking at October and seeing how much I planned, and I planned to make plans, and wondering if like that energy of planning was worth it, or whether I overdid it a bit. Because once again, like I'm gonna plan in life, and I'm not saying like I don't think it makes sense to sit down and be logical about things and think about the future, but I think that there does come to a point where, we should just start, like whatever it is. There's been like a few things where I'm like, oh, I will do that. But first, like I need to, plan out everything for the next 4 weeks and think about like, well, if I did start it, what is it going to look like in 3 months from now? Like, let's just start it and then see in 3 months from now. Because there's been so many times in my life where I've started stuff and I think it's going to go one way, even if I plan it and I plan how I'm going to feel in 3 months from now. And then 3 months from now comes and it's like, it's not gone at all the way I thought it would go. And I feel very differently, and like my plans are going to shift. So it's just like a lot of wasted energy on the front end. I think it's just about finding that balance of doing versus planning, and, being like maybe setting some boundaries for myself. I'm like, okay, I'll give myself these next 3 days to think and to plan and to ponder. And then on day 4, I do. And I don't, fall into the trap of 4 weeks of thinking. But yeah, I just think that all of that kind of just stems from being in your 20s and the pressure to have everything figured out before you start it, and the pressure to, make decisions with clarity, when in general, like, I don't think that that's really like how life works probably. I think like as we get older, you probably just like more confidently move forward without confidence. And your 20s is getting used to that idea. But yeah, that's just what's been on my mind this week. So we're going to actually just close it off there. A little quick episode today. These are my thoughts, and thanks for joining. See you next week.